Hello and welcome back to another Doctor Who product review. In today's review we're going to be travelling back into the wonderful world of Target Novelizations as I'm taking a look at the latest 2022 releases, featuring adventures from both classic series and new series Doctor Who. In the Stones of Blood, the Androids of Tara, the Fires of Pompeii and the Eaters of Light. These books are available to purchase now from all good bookshops, including online as well. If you are somebody who lives by a local bookshop, why don't you ask them to order them in? Support your local shops and local bookshops rather than ordering from the big grisly online giants. As per usual with this series, we have a lovely divide between both classic series and new series Doctor Who, which I think is really nice because we have that reminder of what the Target Novelizations series originally started with some 4th Doctor stories and some classic Doctor Who adventures, but also at the same time, and rather excitingly, we have 2 further new series adventures receiving Target Novelizations, which is always exciting because these are of course the adventures I grew up with, and hopefully the range will recapture that wonderful excitement that the original range also did for children growing up with these books in the 70s and 80s onwards. The first televised story within the 2022 range, and that is The Stones of Blood, as written by David Fisher. In fact, The Stones of Blood was originally released many years ago, but the original target was written by Terrance Dicks. This has now been written by David Fisher, of course the original writer for the TV serial, so naturally of course this target book will be different. Of course it will follow the same plot generically, but there will of course be a few new references and a few new scenes in there as well, which no doubt the initial writer wanted to include in his original story, but as always within classic series Doctor Who, I suppose the budget as well as the time constraints didn't necessarily allow the writers to get the most out of their stories. Now in fact one of the things that I did do during lockdown was revisit the Tom Baker stories. I watched every single one, and one of the stories I encountered for the first ever time was The Stones of Blood, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a great story, which definitely set up the Key to Time series rather effectively. Top of the book continues that lovely Target style, so we have the latest version of the BBC logo there at the very top, which this time has an ever so slightly different typeface to what it had a few years ago. We have the latest or current version of the Doctor Who logo from the 13th Doctor era in the stacked formation, complete with that lovely embossed finish, and of course the Target Novelisation logo there in the top corner as well, just for old time's sake. I think it would be fair to say that this cover is very packed to the brim with lots of different pictures, but it looks very exciting indeed. Of course Anthony Dry has once again returned to contribute all the cover arts for this series, and he has done an excellent job recapturing the artwork of Chris Achilleos, who did of course create the original Target Novelisation covers, or at least the first few, and then of course some other artists also came in and contributed some bold and exciting artworks to the series, the likes of Jeff Cummings, Andrew Skilleter. Lots of different components within this piece, which are in reference, I suppose, to those original Target Novelisation artworks. So in particular, at the very bottom we have the lovely pink TARDIS, which is seen on a number of cover arts, kind of hinting to the lack in continuity that the Target Novelisation series originally had, but also at the same time that sense of action and drama being captured within the artwork. So we have these lovely lightning bolts coming around the side as well as surrounding the TARDIS, with this lovely stippled dotted design almost looking like something out of an original sort of Marvel or DC comic. Visual traits coming in, including this lovely plume of red smoke coming around the side. We have black in the very centre and lots of lovely shades of red coming. As a little example, here is one of the original Target novels of Revenge of the Cybermen, another 4th Doctor story, and again we see that technique being used of a plume of smoke kind of capturing the entire background of the cover art and making it look exciting. 4th Doctor reserved there at the very top to a little bubble, again a technique used quite a lot by Chris Achilleos to kind of frame the different components seen within the artwork. Now the name of this creature from the story has slipped my memory, but I can recall it from the episode itself. It looks very cool. I love the way that the material of the costume has been captured within the artwork. Thing of which that escaped my vision to start with when I first seen this book is that we also have the Key to Time component there at the very side as well. And to the back of the book now, once again we see the return of the usual design, so lovely and simplistic, not really too much going on. At the very bottom we have all of the company information in a tight box, and then we have a very brief synopsis for the story itself, a quote from the 4th Doctor as a little image of him, once again taken from the cover art. Through Target style, it also goes on to state the air date being the 28th of October to the 18th of November 1978, as well as stating who played the main protagonists. Per usual with the Target novelizations, really, the font used within these books is relatively generous. It is quite big, meaning that you can generally rattle through one of these stories relatively quickly. Of course, I'm dyslexic, so naturally I love books like this because they use rather simplistic language, not too overly complex and not unnecessary in the way they use their words, which I think is brilliant for all ages when it comes to reading. Of course, I do tend to deal with quite big words, mostly Latin ones for the vast majority of my time at university doing law. However, there's something about these books that is lovely to read because they don't really take too much of your brain's energy, but at the same time really bring the story to life. I think it is fair to say that the spines for these latest Target novelizations are certainly more consistent compared to the classic series releases. Once again, we just have a continuation of the cream background with the titles of the stories printed in a rather bold manner with BBC Books at the very bottom. This version of the logo is much nicer, much bolder, and certainly works a lot better on a spine. Moving on now to the second book of the 2022 series, and it is yet another classic serial. This time round, once again, the Fourth Doctor and Mary Tamm in the Key to Time story, The Androids of Tara, as again written by David Fisher. Now what I like about this once again is that we are embracing the boldness of the Target novelizations. We have so many different colours used on this cover art, which quite frankly shouldn't work, but it really does. Again, it's something that harks back to the original series of Targets, where there was lots of bold and ridiculous looking covers, but somehow, yes, they did indeed work. Once again, this follows exactly the same format that we've seen with the entirety of the range. It's at the very top, the Doctor Who logo and the title of the story in bold, as well as this lovely cream finish across the entirety of the cover art, making it look very stylish indeed. I think it's really clever how Anthony Dry has somehow managed to make another individual and unique cover, whilst also retaining a few familiar themes to the book that we've just taken a look at, so we almost have a continuation of that lovely red smoke design there in the background, basically taking up the entirety of the surround with the characters sort of within it. So we have the darker smoke effect there towards the top, as we have Count Grendel, once again framed in this rather nice yellow circle, very vibrant indeed, and that likeness is superb. And surrounding him we have this absolute explosion of colour from yellows, oranges, even a little bit of blue there at the very bottom as well. But this ever so slight, subtle detailing, this more liquidy effect which has been used here on a few of these lighter plumes of smoke with some pinks and reds at the very bottom, we'll see a little bit more of a bit later on within this video. And then the main focus, of course, of this cover art is the Fourth Doctor himself. A really brilliant image has been used of the Fourth Doctor smiling away. Facial features very defined, very sharp, really emphasised with that dotted effect. For tradition's sake, here is a rather familiar looking image of the Fourth Doctor from the original Doctor Who and the Brin and Morbius Target novelisation as written by Terrance Dicks. Something of which that I didn't click onto initially is that we actually have Mary Tamm here, which I did notice, but what I didn't notice was that her face is actually blended into the segment of the Key to Time, which I must admit does look a little bit unusual. However, it kind of works. It's a rather clever way of saying that this story is another episode within the Key to Time seasons. Yes, I quite like that, and again, kind of creates a bit of uniformity with that of the Stones of Blood cover as well. As we flip around to the back, again we have a lovely minimalist design, so we have a quote at the top that says, "Why is your impulse to reach for your swords and never a screwdriver?" So I'm assuming that that is a quote from Tom Baker, with of course a lovely image of him there at the top. Since we've just taken a look at two classic Doctor Who serials, I think now is a good chance to discuss the use of the current 13th Doctor era logo on a Target novelisation when the story isn't from the 13th Doctor era. This has received a little bit of criticism. Let's face it, what doesn't receive criticism these days? If you are unaware of that, just look on Twitter for about 5 minutes and you will find at least 6 billion arguments probably going all at the same time. To be honest, for me personally, I think the whole point of consistency doesn't exist within the Target novelisation series, and I know that I've mentioned this in a number of videos in the past, but if anything, the inconsistencies is what makes the Target novelisation series consistent. They were never consistent. When the series originally started, they were absolutely all over the place in design, and then you have the reprints, which are absolutely chaotic. For example, here we have the Mask of Mandragora, a 4th Doctor story with the 7th Doctor logo. Here we have a different logo here used on the City of Death, another 4th Doctor story. And then one of the most baffling ones, we have the Howl Around 80s logo used on this lovely, gorgeous hardback of the 60s story, The Mythmakers, which I picked up a while ago and absolutely love. Consistency doesn't exist It's not something that's ever happened, and hopefully never will, because I think it's something with this series that really makes it stand out, along with the errors on the imagery, something of which that I think has been toned down since the original sort of misuse on the Rose cover, which is a shame. I do love a good mistaken use of image on a cover art. Yes, in summary, I really don't care. I think the one thing that I do think with this use of this logo is it's not as effective. I think that this logo certainly suits the target novelisation style much more than this one, but that doesn't make me angry, because at the same time I'm currently living with a wooden horse with the 80s logo floating above it, which quite frankly, if I can live with that, I can live with anything. I think that it's just a case of personal preference, but at the same time, arguing consistency in my mind is just a pointless one, because that will never happen. So now we move into the new series Target Novelizations of the 2022 Target range, and arguably the most exciting book I think overall for this wave, certainly the one that has got the most attention, and it's the Doctor Who Series 4 story, The Fires of Pompeii, as written by James Moran, featuring David Tennant and Catherine Tate as the 10th Doctor and Donna Noble. I know from personal preference this was the Target novelisation that I was personally most looking forward to, for a particular reason. One, I really loved the Christmas Invasion Target novel, because I loved seeing the 10th Doctor simply portrayed within the prose format. I think he is a Doctor that comes across very well in writing, but also at the same time I was rather excited to see the 10th Doctor and Donna being captured within the Target novelisation style, and ultimately, of course, one of the biggest strengths of the Target series is being able to see rather old episodes of Doctor Who from the context these days, 2005 onwards, and seeing those stories that admittedly we've watched over and over again actually receive brand new content and new scenes and new context to pad out the story and bring a whole new meaning to the narrative. The cover art for The Fires of Pompeii is really interesting because it basically reverses the colour palette compared to all of the other targets within the 2022 series, because as opposed to using lots of vibrant colours, this time we have the use of the darker shades to draw attention to specific objects within the artwork. So here we have the lovely volcano coming up towards the top there with the various bits of lava coming down it, and this excellent cloud of lava and smoke highlighted with this lovely red and then that yellow glow coming around the side. And of course this only stands out as much as it does because of the use of that solid black in the background with this circular frame behind it, nicely encapsulating the entire piece. Of course you have the 10th Doctor there off to the side as well. I don't think this is a picture of him from the Fires of Pompeii. I'm going to place a bet with absolutely no research at all. I think this might be the 10th Doctor from 42, might be completely wrong on that. Pyrovile creature here at the very bottom, he kind of blends into the rest of the piece actually. I think I would have liked to see a bit more detail on him, maybe just ever so slightly bigger, just so we can see him, because from what we can see in this scale, they've excellently recreated the armour on the creature itself. It really does look great and captures the monster from the story. It just would have been nice to maybe see a bit more space for him to kind of be on the cover a bit more. Donna there off to the side as well, again using that framing circular technique that was used quite a lot by Chris Achilleos in the traditional Doctor Who Target series. Utilised in the background of this review currently, we have this lovely framing around the 4th Doctor on probably one of the most well-known Target novelisation covers, and then also another example of the more circular, bold design, much like how we see on the Fires of Pompeii cover here, is the excellent cover for the Face of Evil. Donna Noble really stands out because that use of red in the background, but also I like the fact that we have these little bits of suggestions of smoke here around the side, again using that dotted design. It definitely makes the cover art itself look very exciting, very bold, and stands out. I know that if I see this on a bookshelf in a shop, it will probably be a book that I would want to purchase and read. The back once again features a little write-up synopsis on the story, as well as stating that this was originally broadcast on the 12th of April 2008, when I was 8 years old. This is definitely one of those stories that I can recall watching as a child, along with the rest of Series 4 actually. It's definitely an era of Doctor Who that is rather vivid within my imagination. I can remember really getting into the show at that point in my life, before then expanding out into the classic series. I think in fact when Series 4 was airing, I was probably starting to watch the classic repeats on TV Gold, I think. Kind of very much the beginning of me expanding out into the Doctor Who universe. Completely coincidentally, earlier on in this review I was talking about the use of language within the target novelisations and joking about the Latin within my degree. For the Fires on Pompeii, James Moran has actually used Latin for basically every single one of the chapter titles within this book. So yes, other than the chapter titles, it is actually a really good read. I'm currently about 75% of the way through. It really does sort of add to the TV story whilst also remaining very familiar to the plot as well. Lots of nice new scenes put in there with the 10th Doctor and Donna, in particular at the very beginning, with the Doctor addressing the fact that this is still a rather early time within her travels in the TARDIS and how she's still unsure about this man that she's kind of gallivanting around the universe with. So yes, it's been lots of fun so far. The final book from the Target 2022 range is another new series story, this time round from the 12th Doctor era, and it is The Eaters of Light, as written by Rona Munro from Doctor Who Series 10. And this story in particular is rather lovely to see novelised within the Target novelisation series, as it is written by Rona, who did of course also write the final ever classic Doctor Who serial Survival. To me, this is what the Target novelisation range is all about, that blend of modern and tradition, I suppose, or nostalgia for a Doctor Who time that once was, ultimately that very classic vibe of the original Doctor Who stories. Here we have The Eaters of Light alongside Survival, looking excellent. Two starkly different covers with two very different styles, not just in the actual main cover art itself, but also the use of logo and colour scheme, but two excellent ways of capturing two very different adventures by the same writer. At the very top, along with a relatively simplistic back page. It is a very unusual cover art because we do have those traditional themes in there, in particular on that likeness to the 12th Doctor. This has been excellently captured by Anthony Dry. Lots of lovely dotted detail around the face. I also really love that hark back to the original traditional Doctor Who Target novelisations, with this lovely little bit of space as well as various stars and planets around the 12th Doctor's costume, very much like how we've seen it with the original First Doctor Target novelisations many years ago. I think that is pretty much where this Target novelisation ends for the tradition, because I think the rest of this piece is incredibly new in its design. In particular, I think this lovely cloud of smoke that we see, this red design around the vast majority of the Target cover, is very light and very delicate in the way that it has this rather watercolour liquidy finish to it, as opposed to it being the very harsh lines that we usually see with the Target novelisation cover. As for the Roman soldier, again, this very much looks like an image rather than an illustration, and then we have the dragon there at the very top coming in, a lovely blue highlight on him with the fire and the different blue crackles coming around. A very detailed cover, almost a bit too detailed compared to some of the other Target novelisations that we've seen here on the rock, where we have these little patterns that have been etched into the rock with the raven there at the very top as well. It's a lovely design and is pretty much, I think, probably the best example to date in fact of the Target novelisation series retaining its traditional roots whilst also kind of being pulled into the modern era. Top of the book is exactly the same, the latest version of the BBC logo, the stacked Doctor Who logo, and the title of the story in bold, with the lovely Target novelisation logo at the very top. Turning around to the side, once again we have the 12th Doctor, as well as a little quote from him there. A summary for the story itself, as well as stating that this episode was originally broadcast on the 17th of June 2017. I can't believe it is that long ago since Doctor Who Series 10. It quite frankly only feels like last year, but no, time goes very quick indeed. There we have it. That has been this little presentation of the latest Target novelisation releases from the 2022 series. As always, I've really loved looking at these Target books because I think the style really brings these adventures to life and breathes new exciting energy into these stories, and also excitingly as well allows us fans to revisit Doctor Who adventures under a new lens, having perhaps experienced the stories many times over, in particular for those new series episodes, the likes of the Fires of Pompeii and the Eaters of Light. And as always with this series, it allows the writers who originally wrote the TV serial to expand the characters that they have created, expand the world that they have made, and ultimately give us new scenes and new content that we otherwise didn't get on screen. So it always carries that brilliant novelty of being able to expand the Doctor Who universe, and it's also a very accessible way to get into the reading world as well. If you are wanting to get into Doctor Who books, this is a perfect way to read some Doctor Who stories stories, whilst remaining in somewhat familiar territory. The wording is always really accessible, making them perfect for younger fans but also older fans as well, or simply someone who wants a light bit of reading, because as I mentioned throughout this video, you can get through a Target book relatively quickly. So thank you very much for watching this video. I really hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on The Host Productions for regular Doctor Who content. And of course on that note, I shall see you all next time. Have a nice day, and bye for now.